Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening. I hope you're all well. We're just going to give it a few moments for people to log on and settle in, and then we'll get going very shortly. Yeah, I can see the numbers creeping up there, but whilst we are waiting, it'd be great if everybody could just put where they're logging in from in the chat, just so we can get a sense of who is behind the screens in this virtual space. So yeah, if you're able to, please do just pop in the chat where you're logging on from, and we'll get going very soon. Oh, someone from Brighton, the seaside, nice. And if for those that are just logging on, yeah, we're just asking people to put in the chat where they're signing in from. We've got one Londoner, I'm sure we'll have a few more. Manchester, oh, South London, South Wales, nice. Got a few London, Peckham, Oxford, Southeast London, lots of London. We've got, I think most of our panelists are based in London. Anthony's in Bristol. Oh, someone from Spain, we're going international. Southend, great. We're just going to give it a few minutes. Thank you all so much for joining us. It's really wonderful to see so many of you here tonight. But yeah, we'll get going very soon. Just going to wait a few minutes. Someone's from Essex. Oh, France. Okay, so I think Spain's the furthest, but we have got someone in France. Great. This is what's wonderful about the world of Zoom. We can connect with people all over. So that's really great to see. Okay, cool. I think we will begin. Well, welcome everyone. Yeah, as I said, thank you so much for joining us. We're really delighted to be hosting this masterclass tonight. My name is Jolie Hockings and I'm Programs Manager at Creative Access. And for those of you who are new to Creative Access or haven't been to a masterclass before, we are a social enterprise that provides career-long access, opportunities, support and training to make the creative industries more representative and inclusive, and to ultimately reflect the society that we live in. We're really delighted to be hosting this month's Creative Access Masterclass, focusing on climate change in the creative industries. This is a topic that we've been wanting to cover for a while, and it feels incredibly timely. Just last week, the UN released a startling climate report, and global warming is very much dominating the news. And yeah, obviously, this is a really huge, complex topic, and we will be kind of barely scratching the surface within the time frame that we have. However, we hope to shed a light on some of the roles out there that directly relate to tackling climate change within the context of the creative industries, as well as discussing what a selection of organisations are doing to be more sustainable. Hopefully this evening we will all be a bit more informed and inspired to carry on these conversations in our own communities and places of work. But yeah, I'm so over the moon to be joined by our panel of speakers tonight, who I'll be passing over to very, very soon. But yeah, I'd just like to say a huge thank you and extend a warm welcome to Anthony Shehan Lewis, who is a digital campaigner at Greenpeace, and he's also a Creative Access alumni. So I just wanted to, I'm sure he'll mention that, but just to say, we've got Boka Batesa, who is co-founder of the campaign Choked Up. Really delighted to have Destiny here today. We've got Sunita Ramani, who is account manager from Greenhouse Communications and is also a climate justice campaigner, and also a formal Creative Access trainee, and will be chairing tonight's discussion. And finally, Zoe Constantinou, who is sustainability manager at ITV. We have a strong partnership with ITV at Creative Access, so it's really brilliant to bring in such a strong connection. So thanks, Zoe, for joining us as well. Just very quickly, a little bit about the format. Sunita will be chairing tonight's discussion, as I just mentioned, and then we'll be going into a Q&A from the audience. And we really do encourage you all to put your questions forward into the Q&A function, not the chat function, like we've just been using. Please put it into the Q&A function, because that allows us then, we can upvote at the end. But yeah, we really do encourage, this is very much about what you want to know and what you kind of want to get out of it. So please do make the most of the question, the Q&A at the end. And yeah, we will, you can also follow the conversation live on Twitter and Instagram stories. Our handle is just in the slide there, at _creative access. And there will be a recording of the event afterwards. And very lastly, we have got a very short feedback form that we would really appreciate you filling out at the end. So yeah, please do spend a few short minutes filling it out. We really do appreciate gathering your thoughts and feedback. But I think that's enough from me. Thanks everyone so much for joining us. I'm going to pass over to Sunita now, who is going to be leading the next part of the discussion.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Jolie. I'm so excited to be here and really excited to see so many people joining. Yeah, it's really lovely to have you all here, and I don't think it's necessarily a given that people will join a Zoom webinar about climate change in the creative industries on a Thursday evening. So thank you all so much for giving up your time. We're all really, really grateful. So we're going to kick off. Jolie has very kindly introduced all of us, but I think it would be great to hear a little more about the exciting and diverse career journeys of everyone on this panel. So I'm going to kick off, and then I'm going to hand over to these other three brilliant panelists to share a little bit more about their roles and about their career journeys and how they got where they are now. So to kick off with myself, as Jolie said, my name is Sunita Ramani. I am currently an account manager at Greenhouse Communications. And I'll talk a little bit more in a moment about what that is and what that means for anyone who might not be familiar with communications at all. I wasn't before I started this role, so I can very much give more of an overview of what that means. But to step back a little bit, before I discovered Greenhouse and Creative Access, I really had no idea that a role like this even existed. And that's why I was so excited to be invited to be part of this webinar, because yeah, when I was sitting here a few years ago, wanting to do something creative and really wanting to do something that was helping to tackle the climate crisis and influence environmental change, I really just didn't know what was out there. And so I studied English literature at university and really had no idea what I wanted to do after I graduated, and couldn't relate to those people that graduated knowing exactly what their next step was and, you know, applying for jobs in a very specific sector. I think I was kind of all over the place. I knew that I wanted a role that utilized the skills I developed during my degree, and I loved the idea of doing something creative and different every day. And it was then after graduating that I stumbled across Creative Access. And it was through there that I discovered the role that I currently do at Greenhouse. And it was amazing to discover this platform, which showcased such a breadth and variety of roles in the creative industry, and which supported people from minority backgrounds in such a special and important way. And so in terms of what I do at Greenhouse, the initial role and an internship that I found through Creative Access was as an administrative assistant at Greenhouse Communications, which is where I now am. And I've since progressed then through Greenhouse to become an account manager. And so Greenhouse is a PR and digital communications agency, which is specialized with a mission of driving positive environmental change. So communications generally can really, really vary, but it's all about supporting companies, businesses, individuals, organizations to amplify their message, to get a campaign more widely heard about, to improve their public reputation. It could be kind of any number and mixture of those things. And so what we do at Greenhouse is work with a broad range of clients, from businesses to NGOs to activists, to support them to tackle the climate crisis, get that message out there, help them get their campaigns heard about, in some cases lobbying the government, in some cases targeting specific businesses. It really varies depending on the organization or the individual. And a recent exciting example of this was last year attending the annual climate conference, COP27, which some of you may have seen in the news. It was held in Egypt last year. It was in Glasgow in Scotland the year before. And so last year I was lucky enough to be able to attend that in Egypt and support a coalition of organizations in the food and agriculture space to essentially put the food sector on the map, since food isn't something that's really centered in the climate conversation, but it's something that contributes quite vastly in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. And so it's really important that alongside fossil fuels, alongside energy, alongside transport, it is an important part of the conversation. So it was really exciting and important to be there and to be helping these organizations to put that message forward. And we've also worked with the likes of WWF, Surfers Against Sewage, and many other diverse and varied businesses, organizations, and individuals. But I think that's probably enough about me, and you'll hear from me chipping in as I continue to chair the panel discussion. But I think it would be great to go over now to the rest of our panelists and hear more about their journey. So I'll first go over to Zoe, who is Sustainability Manager at ITV, to give a deeper dive into yourself and your career journey.
Thank you, Sunita. So yeah, I'm Zoe. I am Sustainability Manager at ITV. I've been in the position for about 7 months, but I've worked in sustainability for a couple of years now. My journey into sustainability was a bit of an odd one, I will say. I had finished a degree in politics, so not quite related, gone out into the big bad world, and then COVID hit. And there was just no job opportunities for the minute. So I decided I'd just look for something that was going to earn me money until it was time to get my real job, as I used to call it. And so I ended up working for a television catering company, film and television catering company. And once I got there, I realized that I loved the environment. If you are young or don't need a lot of sleep, it is the place to be. And it was just so exciting being behind that curtain and seeing that whole world. And it was never something that I wanted. I thought I'd end up in some kind of marketing or copywriting. So then I thought, well, okay, how can I work within this sector? And I started reaching out for opportunities within film. And then I thought maybe there's something closer to home. And it was a real odd combination of wanting to find a job that was fulfilling and use my degree, and hating food waste, which ended up being the thing that got me into sustainability. So what I started doing was thinking, okay, how do I get into the office for this company that I'm working for? And so I decided to pitch to them how reducing their food waste would not only make them more money in the long run, but improve their brand image. And we were working for big brands it was a very topical subject, sustainability. And so, yeah, any opportunity I was given, I was trying to showcase my abilities to the senior management team until I think they just gave in one day and they said, okay, you can come and show us if you can implement this. And so I did. And so from there, it was just a couple of years of building relationships with people throughout the film industry and making change from the ground up, which was really exciting and I really, really enjoyed. But as I got settled in the role, I thought that my capabilities, I think, were slightly more suited. I'm very organized. I like to pre-plan. And so I wanted something that was less hands-on and a bit more about the bigger picture. I was, at the time, obviously having not studied sustainability at uni, I was spending my days working and spending my evenings doing additional qualifications to make sure that I knew what I was talking about when I came to work. And so that sort of opened me up into where else can this go? Similarly to you, but I hadn't really thought about a career in this direction. And so I put feelers out. I started looking for jobs, nothing serious, didn't plan on going anywhere. And then I got a message about the job role at ITV. And much to the shock of even the recruiter that messaged me, I got the job. But it was bizarre because I've obviously had a lot less experience than others applying, but I had that real unique work experience that was crucial. We think that I was the first sustainability manager within film and television catering, which is niche, but it's very important. And yeah, it just gave me that unique skill set to get me into the role that I am in today. And so yeah, as I mentioned, I do a lot more now of the planning, the organizing, a lot of the reporting, which is a full-time job in itself. And a lot of the measurement for what we're doing. One of my colleagues put it very well, is that we do the what and the wider team do the how. And so we plan for ITV and our sustainability strategy.
That's brilliant and so exciting, Zoe. And yeah, what an accolade, even if it is a niche one. I think, yeah, it's the niche roles are what we need, because we need this work to be done everywhere. So yeah, thank you so much for that introduction. I think we'll come back to touch on many aspects of that. But I'm now going to hand over to Anthony, digital campaigner at Greenpeace, to introduce yourself.
Hey everyone. Thank you for having me. I guess my story is like quite similar to yours, Sunita. I went to uni. I had no clue really what I wanted to do. I did sociology there because I was like quite lightly political. You know, I knew racism was bad, stuff like that. But yeah, I guess after a while, I learned a bit more, and when I was in my first year, I was just looking for a job, looking for some money so I could stay in Brighton and just have fun with my friends and stuff like that. And I ended up working as a street fundraiser for Greenpeace. And then I kind of realized that they probably got like a pretty good point. And then I wasn't very good at the fundraising thing. Like I got fired after like 2 months, but it was fun in like summer to stay there. And then that was kind of the end goal. Was kind of Greenpeace basically. And then when I came back to London after uni, a few years after that fundraising job, I just did like a bunch of grassroots work and volunteer work with the local Greenpeace group to my area, and then divestment, which is trying to get money out of pension funds, which sounds really boring, and it kind of is, but it's also like a really useful tactic to take action on fossil fuels. So yeah, I then got sent this internship link by one of my good friends, who then became my girlfriend. But anyway, that's a whole different story. And then I was an intern, a paid intern, because Greenpeace are great and they do paid internships only, which is really good. And I was an intern like about 6 years ago, and I've been a junior digital campaigner to now a digital campaigner. And all in that while, I kind of have worked on many different things. Currently working on our deep sea mining campaign, which is kind of yet to launch. It's going to launch next week. But I worked on all of the UK climate politics last year. I've worked on the plastic campaign, where you maybe have seen like Boris Johnson getting covered in plastic waste and stuff. Palm oil, ocean protection. I've been there for like almost 6 years now, so quite a lot of stuff. Greenpeace is like a campaigning organization that tries to get companies and governments to basically be better and be leaders and not kind of do the bare minimum, whether that's Coke, McDonald's, Rishi Sunak, the Treasury. We will ask supporters to take action with us, to donate with us, so that we can take action and try and win our campaigns. And my role specifically is a digital campaigner. So that would be like on the online space, sending emails to your MP, videos, that kind of thing, signing the petition, social media, memes, TikToks, that type of thing. I think that is probably a good intro. Thank you.
Yeah, a great overview of trying to encompass so many different and diverse things and all those different exciting campaigns that you've done, and exciting to get that sneak peek into the deep sea mining one. Thank you for that. And then we have one final very exciting panelist. I'm really excited to hear you introduce yourself, Destiny, because I was reading a little bit about you. We didn't get a chance to meet before this, but your story is so inspiring, and I'm just really excited personally to hear more about Choked Up. So Destiny, please do go ahead.
Hi, my name's Destiny. I'm 19 years old, and I'm a student, but when I'm not a student, I do campaigning. And so I guess my journey to that kind of started when I was 16, 17. A couple of friends and I, with like loads of mentoring and like just loads of help from like a lot of like, I guess, older grassroots campaigners and stuff, kind of got together and were able to co-found Choked Up. And we're an environmental campaign that sort of focuses on, I guess, like the socio-economic side to climate justice. And in being able to co-found this campaign, we sort of had to think about like what part of the environmental, I guess, like crisis are we going to focus on? And air pollution happened, not just happened to be, but it happened to be one of like, I guess, the pressing issue that was like, I don't know, like affecting all of us in very equal ways. But we knew that we were like the way that we grew up in like areas in South London meant that we were essentially getting neglected by the people that, you know, our parents and our carers sort of voted for to sort of take care of us and our well-being. And so we kind of saw this welfare issue as something that we shouldn't have to suffer alone in a sense. And so again, paired with like loads of mentoring and loads of help, we like started up Choked Up. And obviously it's a bit difficult when you start a campaign in the pandemic. So like in the summer of 2020, we didn't really like know like how we're gonna like get about it. And so we kind of the first thing we sort of did was take things a lot more digitally. So like, you know, really engaging in social media to be able to like sort of start a conversation about the issue, like with air pollution, you know, who's worst affected by it, why is that the reason, and all that jazz. And then we sort of brainstormed for like most of like the autumn winter of 2020, and we kind of came up with this idea where we would like make up like mock road signs that highlighted the issue of air pollution, how it was affecting Black and brown communities, working class communities the most. And we sort of like, we've got loads of help in this as well because we can't carry road signs, but we got help to like put them up in areas that we lived in like London. So we're talking like Lewisham, we're talking also Catford and Brixton, and we also put them up in areas similar to us, but like around, more so around East, so like Whitechapel and all of that jazz. And this sort of gained like a national traction, and we got like it was really well received by like, you know, local news, and like I guess that was really, really good because again, we were really able to like get the ball rolling and all of that jazz. And that's kind of how we started. So this is like, now this is talking like, I don't know, 2021. And I think I guess our overall goal is to ensure that the UK creates a sort of updated version of the Clean Air Act, because the Clean Air Act as we know it doesn't cater necessarily to 2021 issues because it was last updated in the mid-90s. And, you know, it's poorer communities that are having to suffer with this, and that's being paired with like other diseases that they're contracting, and like so there's a lot going on that sort of needed to be spoken about. And I think there's this sense of like disempowerment from like our communities because we have so much other things to prioritize. So like I know that my parents and carers would have to prioritize, you know, getting food on the table, paying the bills and stuff, and so they don't really have the time to sort of campaign, which is why like a lot of our issues that we sort of are expected to live with aren't being like raised in this sort of agenda. So it's been really, really nice being able to sort of, I guess, like speak up, I guess, for like our peers and our families and our friends, and that's sort of gone really, really well. And I guess since then, because obviously it's quite hard for the three of us because we're either traveling or have degrees to do. So sometimes what we're sort of working on is going beyond like the raising awareness sort of aspect, because everybody knows that air pollution is a bad thing. And like we've had loads of conversations where we've like really had to like specify why we're specifically campaigning for like Black and brown working class communities in particular, and why our voices need to be raised in a very I guess white dominated environmental movement. And so going beyond raising awareness, we're sort of trying to get in touch with like I guess our more political lobbying side. So again, working alongside other grassroots campaigners to work alongside policymakers and people sort of involved in like, you know, the law side of things to ensure that we're really getting to our aim of ensuring that there is a new law that, you know, coincides with like the WHO targets, maybe even surpasses those if we're lucky enough in this country, just so we can ensure that, you know, people, I guess, in my generation, but also the generations that are to come, aren't sort of like having to bear the brunt of something that just wasn't like necessarily our fault. And that's kind of the vibe that we're sort of going on with now. So just, I guess, a lot of like collective and community organizing, and a lot more of, I don't know, us getting into like, I guess, getting into spaces where we're not really like expected to be in, I think is the whole scary part that we're trying to sort of work around. But I think after like, I guess, gained respectability like as a movement and as a campaign, I'd like to think that stuff like that will come a bit more easier. But you know, every day's a new day and all that jazz. So that's kind of what Choked Up is, and how we're sort of going about you know, 2 and a bit years on. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that intro, Destiny. Yeah, I think you raised so many important points there. And for anyone who hasn't looked into Choked Up or come across your work before, those visuals of the road signs are incredible and so striking. So I would highly recommend giving them a Google and having a look at those images. Yeah, I found them really, really striking and powerful. And such an important point as well that you raised about the impact on Black and brown communities and, you know, marginalized folks being the worst impacted by the climate crisis, and how that also really influences the work I think that many of us do. So thank you so much for raising that point. And I think really interesting after hearing all of those introductions to have the diverse perspectives of Zoe in more of a corporate environment, and Anthony working with a very established campaign group, and then Destiny coming in with a grassroots sort of local community organizing perspective. So really interesting to see how all of these three routes and these three careers are very different, but also very much focused on the same or similar issues. So yeah, thank you all for those introductions. And on that note, I thought that something interesting to touch on following from that is the skills that you've taken with you into these roles, and how those have been balanced with the skills that you've gained whilst doing them. Because for me personally, as I mentioned, I studied English literature, which has some connections to the current role that I do in PR and communications, but also there are so many things that in the 2 years since I joined Greenhouse, I've learned on the job. And obviously there is, you know, official organizational training, but also there are so many things that you learn just from being in that environment, coming into the office, learning from people around you who've been doing the job for much longer. And so I'm interested to hear from all three of you what your perspectives are on that, and how much you've learned on the job versus the skills that maybe you felt in your interviews or during application processes were useful and important. So maybe we go to Anthony first, and yeah, would you like to elaborate on your experience of that?
Yeah, so I am in the mobilization team at Greenpeace, but when I applied for that internship, I had no clue what that meant. But it turns out that that was like kind of like social media and like stuff that I'd already been doing for the grassroots kind of organization, like the divestment groups that I've been doing in the past. So there are certain things like just being social media literate and stuff like that that you can bring into these current jobs, like Destiny was mentioning about on the online space as well. So I'm sure, like, you know, it's relevant to most of our jobs, and likewise, like I'm sure Zoe, maybe, you know, ITV probably do social media like promotion of their sustainable campaigns. So yeah, I think there's obviously some skills there. And then when I was in maybe grassroots groups, I had like emailed different faith institutions and stuff, and I kind of got a little bit lucky that some of their everyday skills that I didn't realize were skills were actually like wanted by Greenpeace. And then yeah, like they've been really, really amazing at training me how to kind of think more strategically as a campaigner, and then giving me like the resources to learn Photoshop and like video editing and stuff like that. And yeah, how to make like digital tools that will, you know, kind of troll like companies or governments and stuff like that. So yeah, and I think what's kind of maybe good is that you can kind of choose what skills you would like to get better at. Like in my team, there are people who are good at some things who are maybe not quite good at others. And I think in this kind of movement, all skills are welcome. So yeah, I think it's good to just be confident in what you are capable of.
Yeah, definitely. And to remember that things like social media, that when you're young, you're told is like a waste of time and to put your phone away, actually, you know, is just getting more and more important, and having an interest and a passion for whatever you have a passion for can really come into play in whatever area. If you end up working in climate, yeah, you can absolutely specialize in those things. And yeah, as Anthony said, at Destiny, I know you also mentioned social media, and I'm interested in your perspective on that. But also one thing that you mentioned that I thought would be interesting to touch on is you talked about having mentors as you were growing into your role in co-founding Choked Up and having support with that. So I'm interested as well in how you came about finding those mentors. Is that something that you were actively reaching out to find people to support you, or how did you come about linking up with people who helped you out during that time?
Yeah, so me and the girls really lucked out, and I really do mean this, because essentially, the reason why Choke Top was like sort of formed the way it is, was because, so there was this charity, there is this charity, called the Advocacy Academy, and they're based in Brixton, so like South London, like I guess where we're all sort of based, so like not too far. I'm actually in the office right now. They let me have the room to like have this call because like my house is like going under like too many renovations. But the point is, what the Advocacy Academy do is they like want to champion and like encourage sixth form students, so like year 12, 13 students at the time, like build on what makes them feel angry, and then, you know, found campaigns based on that. And so I was in a cohort that graduated in 2021, which meant that we did all our like mentorship scheme work in 2020. And what that meant was when we all sort of got enrolled into it, because it technically was like a social justice school, we had, I think it was around 6 months worth of mentoring, I guess being taught loads of like different, not taught, but being, yeah, essentially being taught about loads of different, and like how they all sort of intersect. And then we were sort of able to sort of make our own minds up about what we were gonna like actually campaign about, which is why like the environment and air pollution, that's where all these ideas started coming from. And we were all sort of formed into a group, me, Angie, me, Letty, and then we were able to sort of start our campaign from then. And it was just essentially loads of brainstorming in terms of like what our campaign name is going to be called, things like logistics, like, you know, how people are going to contact us, emailing, how we're going to like present ourselves again with social media, especially like in 2020, bouncing off what Anthony said about how everyone's skills are sort of like welcome. We sort of had to like discuss what our strengths were. And so like I'm really good at like, you know, the silly old like Instagram story and the tweet. So like I'm more on the social media side of things, but the girls are like so much better at like writing. So like they do a lot of like article work, and like we all collectively sort of take turns on who wants to do interviews, because like we're not the biggest fans of interviews, but like we will do it if like we need to, and stuff like that. And so we kind of work around what just works best for us. And I guess the mentoring side in particular comes from like the help that we got with actually making the road signs, because obviously we didn't know where we could get somebody to like create a mock road sign. I guess all we really did, well, I say all we really did, but like I guess all we did do was essentially like create the designs for it and stuff, and then we were paired with people that sort of knew. Again, this is like through the Advocacy Academy, and so we essentially got like loads of help in terms of starting our campaign. And then we all sort of graduated in early 2021, so now we're all like self-governing. But again, through that we were able to just, I guess through the Advocacy Academy, we just have like loads of like supports. Like I can always go back into their office like I am now, or like we've had like loads of other like grassroots campaigners sort of reach out to us, and like we've sort of worked with them on things like across the years. So it's all, I think everything has been like very incidental but like quite intentional as well. So I guess the Advocacy Academy has been really, really just helpful and supportive in giving us that like leg up, sort of bridging the gap between, you know, young, very ambitious, slightly intimidated children against like the big wide world, and the idea that there's just so much waiting for us that we just have to tap into, but we just have to make that we have to make that first step. But now we're sort of like over it, and just sort of like doing what we can. But that's kind of where like all the mentoring and all the support comes from. And it's quite nice to feel like, to know that I guess the support that we do get is quite, I don't know what the word is, like infinite, it seems, which is just, it's just nice to know that like we can just like get in touch whenever, but now we're the support basis for other people. Reciprocity that sort of lives on, especially with like grassroots campaigners, which is like always really, really nice, because if you're not necessarily doing something for yourself, you always know that like the cause that you're fighting for is always going to be bigger than you, and you feel more I feel like you always feel more inclined to do something if you're not necessarily doing it for yourself. But I don't know, that's just like me being very like instinctive. I guess even that skill, which isn't really a skill, I think it's just me being empathetic, is kind of helpful when it's kind of helpful when you're actually like doing a campaign, because a lot of campaigning work, if not all of it, is based on this like common empathy that you should have because you care about the cause that you're sort of advocating for, I guess. So like to put it very shortly, we just got a lot of mentoring that lasted about half a year, and through that we were able to sort of gain loads of connections, I guess, along the way. And now we're just sort of like, we just know loads of people, but I can sit well with that. I can't say that I complain, but yeah, that's kind of the gist about all of that, I guess.
That's a really interesting insight into the Advocacy Academy. I also love a phrase that you used while you were talking about that, which is incidental but intentional. And I think that's maybe a phrase that a few of us here would use to describe our journeys into this space and how that's kind of fallen into place, but also I think was maybe intentional all along. Yeah, really interesting insight. And I think I'm increasingly seeing, I don't know about the rest of you, but more and more of those sorts of local community initiatives or grants or support networks for campaigns and initiatives like these, which is really, really exciting to see. And I think if that's something that you're interested in, then definitely look into if there's anything in your local area. Someone shared something around our team the other day, which was around if you want to create like a bee-friendly space in your local area. Apparently the West of England Council, because I'm based in Bristol, offering like grants to schools and local community areas to do that, which I just thought was so sweet and wonderful. So yeah, there are always things like that happening if that's something that you're interested in looking into. But yeah, I'd love to go over to you now, Zoe, and here, because as you mentioned, obviously your role now is quite niche, but I'm sure that there are skills that you've carried from earlier parts of your journey to help you with the way that you work now. And I think it'll be really interesting to hear about what some of those are and how you found that learning process, maybe some of the new skills you've had.
Yeah, absolutely. Funnily enough, I use more of the skills that I learned at university now in this position. But in my last one, huge learning curve. Obviously going into a job where I didn't really have the knowledge and was learning on the job. But also it's like people management. A huge part of my job is we know what's going on. We all know what's going on in the world, but you've got to translate that into business talk, or you've got to translate that into finances. You've got to find what they care about and then attach your purpose to it. And so that's a skill that I think will follow in any social purpose career in general. But I find that people that work in corporate sustainability speak a totally different language. And I think that that's intentional. I think that they don't hire for people to come in and tell them the truth, unfortunately. And so what you have to do is be smart about what you're saying and how much you're giving. And you have to put on a front of, I care about the business growth. So we need a planet. And it's a really odd thing to balance. But I think in terms of skills, that's something that's been the most useful to me is being able to read what people need, take that time first to understand what they're trying to accomplish. Which sort of works, yeah, like I say, in working in a corporation in general. It's like applying sustainability strategy to a core business model rather than trying to change their entire business model, because it's just not going to happen. So yeah, definitely a lot of people skills. But like I say, studying politics, it was very law-based. And so now I'm back to a land of reporting and legislation. And so I'm leaning a lot more on what I've learned before. But continuously learning. I think that's the key with this, is that whatever we learned last year is out of date at this point. And so just continuous, and there's so many free courses, there's so many courses. So like I'm again doing another one at the minute, because you need to be able to have that constant conversation and you need to be up to date. And it's great to have climate news and it's great, but sometimes it can catastrophize, and it's really difficult to then balance your mental health when you're in this space and you're really trying to do something about it, and then all you're reading is the bad news that's coming out. So I find that constant learning, it kind of makes me feel like I've got tools to handle it, rather than I'm just under this like snow pile of information, which sometimes it can feel like. But yeah, I think that it's ever changing, and I think that no two sustainability roles are the same. I think it was so right that what a diverse panel of people that are all trying to get to the same goal, but our day-to-days are so different, our skill sets are so different, and that's crazy. But I think that it's necessary. I think in order to tackle this from every angle, we all need to have those individual skills. So but yeah, I would love to say that I have a particular set of skills that make me amazing. One of my colleagues likes to say I'm a wizard with a Google Doc, so you know, but apart from that, I think it is just continuously wanting to learn. It's a thirst for learning. That is the one thing I can say that everybody I've met in the sustainability space has in common. It's just that constant thirst for knowledge, I think.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that as well. I think there's an endless capacity for researching and understanding more and new things, and there is just so much going on in this space that I think it feels like quite an essential quality to have. But yeah, that's really interesting, and I think quite a nice segue into something else which I'm keen for us to touch on, because you mentioned making the business case, and I think that's something that maybe our panelists will have some different and interesting views on. But again, obviously we come from quite different types of organizations, and looking within the climate and environment space as a whole, it does sometimes feel like there is a bit of a dividing line where you've got the government and corporates often on one side, and then on the other side you've got the activists and the campaign groups, and it's often this kind of hatred and anger directed from one side towards the other, and vice versa. And I think this panel alone kind of shows that that's not necessarily the case, but I think there's maybe still a bit of demystifying to do, and really understanding, maybe for some of the people tuning in and thinking about, well, where do I want to go? Do I want to go more towards a corporate and kind of having a sustainability role within that? Or do I want to be on the other side in terms of, being part of a campaign group or starting my own grassroots initiative? What feels right, and how does having impact look in kind of all of those different scenarios? So I think maybe if we go to you first, Destiny, it would be interesting to hear your perspective from that kind of grassroots. You started Choked Up, co-founded it from the ground up, and I guess that's targeting the government and maybe local councils as well, and pushing them, maybe also the public as well, in a sense, by having those road signs and really raising awareness. But as a young activist in this space, what are your thoughts on where we should be in terms of navigating that tricky line between, activism and campaigning, but also understanding that I think in some cases there is a really important case to be made for working from within the inside of these businesses and corporations, and encouraging and really pushing them to grow in terms of their sustainable and environmental initiatives from the inside. What are your thoughts and perspective?
It's like we all consider, like, within our, again, like a lot of our campaign is based on the conversations that we're due to have or have already had, and obviously that comes with like speaking with like other grassroots campaigners, but we're all speaking the same language. I guess I'm bouncing off Zoe here, but the idea that we're all fighting for the same cause but speak completely different languages is like something that, like, as a campaign we always have to consider. We tend to brand ourselves as having like a hearts and minds approach, so tapping into like the hearts of the public, so then we can sort of like gain momentum from their part, because and then we encourage them to like tell their MPs or tell their like local councillors, and so like applying that pressure like through other means, just through encouragement essentially. But I think that, plus being like a young person, I can't really deny that there's a lot of like government resentment, and obviously that comes with like loads of different factors, like from the fact that, like, I guess the way that we're living now, we could be a lot better off, but we're just not, because we feel like we're like suppressed and halted a lot, and obviously that sort of builds up like a lot of like pent up aggression, resentment, and obviously I felt that when I was like 14, 15, 16, in my like most angstiest era. Like I would like I don't know, just be really angry all the time. But you realize that sense of like anger is quite hot and it's quite rash, and it doesn't really take you places. And so when you sort of cultivate what annoys you, what makes you upset, and when you sort of mold it into something that you can actually make a bit more productive, i.e. the conversations that we have or that we intend to have, you start to envision that sense of a goal. And I guess we're constantly, trying to like work towards that. And obviously, I think we find that we get like a lot of imposter syndrome, because again, like as much as it is fun saying, I spoke to this MP and I went to Parliament, did this, that, and the other, it's really, really intimidating as a young person to go up and sort of not necessarily call out like I don't know, like policy leaders and stuff, but to actually confront the issue and be like, you know, we're kind of going through this and we don't really appreciate it. Can we work together to like create this sort of solution, or how are we going to like sort of ameliorate the environment that we live in, essentially, to ensure that, you know, more lives aren't being lost or, you know, significantly compromised because the factors that we can't necessarily control. All of that is very scary when you realize that not everybody wants to listen to you, and that idea of, I guess, code switching, which I think within me has just been embedded since like forever. And now that I go to university, that's like even more like up there, especially with the uni that I go to, I guess. The idea of, I guess, accommodating the way that you speak, so that the certain audience that you want to tap into are tuned to what you will say, is something that we like constantly have to do. And sometimes it does get fatiguing in like a social aspect, because like sometimes you just want to be yourself and just speak the way that you normally do, but obviously you can't really do that all the time, because in order for people to sort of empathize with what you're going through, because they won't ever understand, they can't relate, you have to speak to them in a way that isn't necessarily talking at them. Like, you're not like, we don't intend to be I guess teachers and just telling people, oh, this is what we're going through and you are just going to have to listen. There's a word that I want to say, but I can't remember what it is, so I might remember it or might not. But like, obviously we don't want to do that, because I feel like us as young people had been like grown up with that sort of like mindset and just been told loads of things that we're supposed to just accept as fact. And obviously that just hasn't worked, because I wouldn't be like critiquing like every single thing that I see in the world if you know, if that sort of methodology actually worked. And so I think that's why we're so like, I guess that's why we always push for the idea that we just need to like continue having conversations and to continue, I guess, listening to each other. But again, it's sort of biting the bullet and making that first step into like accommodating yourself, making yourself somewhat palatable at first, to the audiences that you want to reach the most, because they're the hardest to, I guess, tap into. It's a bit like an innocent Trojan horse sort of attempt to like try and get your way into things, but not in a way that we mean harm, obviously, because that's like the last thing we want to do. But I feel like in order to gain as much traction and as many perspectives in our favor, you know, we're going to have to use some sort of rhetoric that just sort of resonates with an audience that we wouldn't necessarily, you know, find across the road, for example. And so yeah, so again, to put it shortly, I guess being able to adapt the way we sort of present ourselves to ensure that people are listening to us the first time around, so we can just sort of bounce on that, is kind of the way that we go about things. But like, I guess the imposter syndrome never really goes away. But you just don't tend to showcase that a lot. You just sort of have to like fake it till you make it and pretend like you know every single fact in the world. So then you're not like constantly like challenged in a way that you feel like you have to be defensive against. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you raised that point, and that may be something that others can relate to as well. But I think working in this space, it's not something that I'd necessarily thought loads about before I entered it, because before, yeah, as with some others of you, when I was at university, my sort of approach and connection to climate change and these issues was very much more on the activist side, and it was, you know, organizing protests at university and kind of, yeah, joining student groups, and I think when you're in that space and surrounded by people who just agree with you, and you don't have to, you know, shout to get yourself heard, or, you know, you don't have to think about the way that you're speaking about these issues before you talk, then actually going from then into a more sort of routine job, and, you know, speaking to clients, many of whom have the same thoughts and approaches but don't necessarily agree with everything that I think or feel, or that many of us at the organization do. I think there's, yeah, a certain element of, as you say, code switching and really thinking about the way that we present our views and thoughts, and that can be something that, as you say, can be quite draining, or yeah, you just have to think a lot about it. So I think it's a really important point to have raised. And yeah, I wonder what your perspective is, Zoe, because obviously I think similar things, but also very different, in the sense that I'm sure you'll be one of a few voices in a big organization, many of whom their roles are not focused on sustainability and climate change, and they're probably not thinking about those things in their day-to-day at all. So what's that experience like for you, and how do you navigate that?
It's definitely unique. I think that for a while I was like, God, I'm so jealous of everybody that works within an organization that's focused on climate action, because you all speak the same language and you can all talk about it together. And yeah, we can't really. And even down to like the endless acronyms that exist within the climate space, and having to remind yourself every single day that you need to spell out everything you're trying to say. And it's really little things, but yeah, it's definitely totally different language. And we do that. I'm a team of 2 that sit centrally, so we're small and we are growing. But when we get together with the wider teams, we need some help. Like we need other people who get the issue that we're trying to get to. But I think that the 2 go hand in hand. So like we can't do what we do without the likes of Destiny and Anthony. Like we need that social pressure in order to transform a business. And so this is where the 2 counterparts come together, because you present these issues and then the business doesn't know how to handle them, which is where we come in and we say, this is how your business can adapt for this change. And so whilst the languages are so different and they feel worlds apart, and I have guilt as well. I work for a corporation when I could be doing something for something, bigger. But I do recognize that you need both. You need, it's a business response, and the business doesn't know how to respond. So we are that translator that sits between the social issues and the business, and we say, this is what this means, and this is how you can do something about it. But yeah, definitely it is very bizarre being within a small team. But what's encouraging is we're getting an awful lot of people reach out to us and ask us. I think people care more and more. Like you say, it becomes more and more topical. And so people are hearing about it in the news, they're worrying, they know that they've got people around them in the office that could explain to them what they can do on a personal level, on a business level. We've got people within the organization who are taking like leaps and bounds in the right direction because of personally wanting to, and then also being in a position of power. So we are seeing more and more people trying to understand what it's all about. And I think that the jargon doesn't help. I think that the way that the climate crisis is sometimes handled by the media doesn't help, and that people just shut down. And so it's like it's so crazy because it feels ridiculous, but you've got to put a positive spin almost on the fact that the planet's dying for people to engage, that we're not allowed to put it into content in a depressing way because of course no one's, and so you've really got to figure out how to get around it. But yeah, it's quite tricky.
Yeah, understandably, but also I think positive and comforting to hear that other people within ITV and within your industry, you're seeing people taking an interest and increasingly caring, because I think sometimes depending on where you look or where you go for your sources on this type of stuff, it can sometimes seem like, oh, we're going in the right direction, and then other times, you know, you're reading the news and things and it really just feels like no one cares and you're fighting a losing battle. So yeah, I think that's definitely a positive among a few negatives with this issue and when we talk about these things. But yeah, what's your perspective, Anthony, working at Greenpeace for quite some years, and how do you see that navigating between the kind of the corporates and the campaigning side of things?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm probably in quite a different situation to Zoe. Like I'm quite lucky that obviously when we talk about this stuff, this is our job, I guess, to talk about it as an organization. And I share political views with most people in the organization, like and we'll learn a lot politically from other people as well, with many like experienced kind of activists and I guess people within the movement. But I think like the corporate question is always difficult, but I think what why places like Greenpeace exist is because we want people to take action against those corporations, and I guess like quite similar to Choked Up as well, like, you know, air pollution was caused by car makers and, you know, like kind of fudging the science around Dieselgate, and caused by lawmakers who refused to kind of, you know, compensate people who had bought those cars, but also, you know, put in place proper measures to reduce air pollution. And we still see that today with like politicians getting annoyed about the ULEZ, for example, even though it's, you know, like potentially life-saving to so many people. Like I think almost 10,000 people have died in London just from air pollution. And that is as a result of, unfortunately, like corporate, but also government as well. And I think one thing that we say at Greenpeace, or like one of our, I guess, like mantras is people power, essentially. And all of our campaigns are powered by people. And, you know, like Destiny and Choked Up are a really good example of that. You know, there's people within the movement who are doing like incredible things to hold people to account. And that's within the government, but also in corporations as well. And, you know, like there are certain, so like people like Zoe, for example, and within her corporation, within ITV and within different spaces, they will lobby the people above them, and essentially that people power will eventually rise to the top if it's loud enough. Within Greenpeace, we lobby Greenpeace. Like we have wanted campaigns to be run, so we as staff members come together to run those campaigns from Greenpeace, and we will like convince senior management that this needs to happen around campaigns, or this needs to happen around anti-racism, for example. And like people power essentially is you know is the answer, I guess. But it has to move that, you know, like quite scary, big, intimidating obstacle of corporate powers. But yeah, I'm very lucky because I don't necessarily have to do what Destiny has to do in terms of like switching how you speak to people. Like we do obviously frame things in different ways because we know different audiences are going to react in some way, but ultimately we know that if we can galvanize a core supporter base to do something for us and to put pressure on certain people, then we can like effectively win most of our campaigns. But it is difficult, and there are some campaigns that obviously, you know, we're still, you know, climate change isn't solved. we're still trying to fight like a lot of campaigns and trying to make that progress. But yeah, I'm quite like privileged. I get to make like really outrageous memes and put them out, and yeah, get like a lot of my colleagues, I think some of whom are maybe on this call, they make amazing content that speaks to people maybe like us who have that anger, who have grown up, you know, with austerity and other things, and whether it's the Tories or, you know, like Keir Starmer, you know, there are certain aspects that we can all kind of share our frustration with and kind of communicate with. So I'm quite lucky in that respect. Does probably mean I'm in a bit of an echo chamber, but I'm all right with that for now anyway.
No, that's a really good point as well, I think, because I think it's easy to see it as this kind of scale from, you know, corporate to activist, with activists being like the most dedicated and impactful. But actually there are maybe not pros and cons, but there are different challenges and opportunities with both. And I really like the way that you described as well, Anthony, like Zoe is a lobbyist within her organization, and, you know, everyone actually is a lobbyist within wherever they work. Even if you don't work in a climate change focused role at all, you're a voice in your company, and as an employee, as a member of staff, you have the right to express yourself, and you can influence people and make change in all sorts of small ways. So yeah, I think that's a really important sentiment and thing to be aware of. So I think we're going to turn now to the Q&A, because we've had quite a few questions come through, and yeah, we've got about half an hour left, so I want to make sure we have time to address some of those. Jolie, did you want to add something?
Yeah, thanks so much. We have a function on our questions, so if everybody can just go to the Q&A section, and you can put a thumbs up to vote for the one that you would most like to be answered. Just quite a diplomatic way of dealing with questions we might not be able to get through all of them. So I'll just allow people to do that, and also please do put more questions in the Q&A as well. But I think the one that is most popular at the moment is a question for everybody. How can we draw more attention to jobs and sustainability? It seems like quite a few people fall into those roles. Before I started ITV and started working with Zoe, I had no idea jobs like this existed. Do you think there could be more information and resources to encourage more people to start grassroots campaigns or join organisations like Greenpeace or ITV?
I don't mind starting on that one. Yeah, there can be so much more done. I think exactly the same thing that I a few years ago didn't realize how many jobs there were. I think it's quickly growing. So I think that naturally will happen, is that we'll see a lot more. A lot of companies are really boosting the amount of people that work for them. A lot of campaigns are gaining a lot of traction. So I think we'll see more in that space. And so naturally you'll see more of it. But I think that there should be more done to encourage activism for sure. And like I completely agree with what Anthony was saying before about the people power. And I think that that's the most useful tool we have. And so I think that that's probably the message we have to get across is, yes, there's all these careers within this industry, but here are your options as well for how you can do this. You can do it as your career. You can do it while you're studying on the side. You know what I mean? It can be a part of your life, even if that doesn't mean that's the career you're going for. But yeah, I think that we will see a lot more of it within job spaces in general. I think that it's definitely a growing sector.
Yeah, I guess just to add to that, I also agree. I think it's campaigning organizations are the need for them is becoming more and more obvious every single day. Likewise for roles like Zoe's role and sustainability within big corporations. I definitely think that there needs to be done more about educating how people can actually work in these fields and how they can take action, and how the skills that they have already can like see them into these roles. I think that, I mean, there's like roughly 50 people on this call, and that's probably because a lot of people are like quite passionate within about politics or climate change, and I feel like there isn't enough of an obvious pipeline to funnel that passion into like a job, or whether it's, you know, like an activist cause. And what I'm lucky to have experienced is that at Greenpeace I can see those people, but I do think that it was difficult for people to maybe get there. Like I started as an intern and I didn't know what mobilization was. I got quite lucky in a way, like, yeah, to bring it back, incidental but intentional maybe. But yeah, I definitely think more could be done from kind of everyone, from the media, from schools, from university, and like from our leaders as well. To be honest, like I think politicians and councillors could be talking about stuff like this a bit more, and graduate schemes could exist, not to get people into, you know, sales and recruitment, but into sustainability and that type of thing, because yeah, obviously sorely needed.
Yeah, I would like to just add on a little bit. I guess I can offer a slightly different perspective, but yeah, I definitely agree with both points that were earlier stated. But I also think, well, this is quite similar, but I think fundamentally climate education is so important. Like I guess the only reason why I got properly engaged with like the climate movement is because like when I was younger, I just really cared about recycling one day and then just like never looked back. But like obviously like not everyone's going to have that same drive, or they'll have the same amount of drive, but like for a different course, whether it be sport or whatever. But I feel like in school, like when I was doing like science and yeah, I think science, even history and geography GCSE, the most you'd hear about climate change is, you know, the greenhouse effect, and oh, the Earth's getting ever so slightly hotter. And like even at that age, around, you know, 14, 15, 16, I didn't know that, like I didn't know the gravity or the extent of how bad it is, like, you know, the whole Earth to heat up like 1 degree, because obviously it doesn't sound like a lot. And so I think that fundamentally just like, I think there just needs to be like a whole curriculum change where the impact of the climate crisis is being like actually mentioned at all, because there's only so much that you can do with like knowing the greenhouse effect and having it on like your one GCSE paper question. Like it just, it's not going to resonate with students, and I don't think it resonated with a lot of my peers. A lot of us just go into like school thinking we've got to pass the exams to go to sixth form college and then to go to uni. That's kind of the way that I kind of saw it, except the fact that like obviously I like just really care about recycling. But I guess like now that I'm a uni student, a bit more because I don't really know what to do. But I think again I'm quite in the sense that I do have the option to like apply to internships within the uni, or like the specific scholarship where if your like annual parental income is like less than, I don't know, 25k or something like that, you're automatically enrolled into this like internship scheme where the uni pairs itself with like loads of different like industries, whether it be about politics, whether it be about law, whether it be about like the environment, and you can directly apply to be an intern for those sort of schemes. And I think that's a really good initiative, because again, like if you just have a particular drive, doesn't necessarily have to be about the environment, but if you particularly care about something, but because of like, you know, your socioeconomic background, you haven't necessarily been granted or afforded the ability to sort of like connect with people in those spaces, having like your own educational institution be able to help you with that means that you're sort of looking beyond your degree, and I really enjoy that. So because I do like loads of campaigning already, like I'm not necessarily going into like climate related internships, but like I've applied for like an internship at a publishing house, and I feel like I get to put my love for writing in I guess a different sense, and I guess I can even like apply I guess my love for like climate justice into spaces like publishing houses, where like obviously a lot of people are just like focused on like editing and like or like in their books, and as much as I enjoy that, if I can apply that like I don't know, my perspective and how I see things for even like a week or two when I'm there, I know that will make all the difference, because again it's all about I guess and exchanging perspectives and ideas. So yeah, I guess the idea of just connection and being able to use what you can is helpful in that sense.
Thanks, Destiny. Oh, that's some really brilliant advice. I'm going to move on to the next question, and I might just do a quick fire round of just asking one person for each question, so we can get through more. Because I know that they're all quite big questions. So the next one that's had quite a lot of votes is Zoe. I'm going to go to you. You talked about how learning and attending courses can act as an anecdote to the catastrophizing which dominates the environmental discourse. Can you talk a bit more about that, and if there are any books or courses you'd recommend learning from?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd like to say I am the fountain of all knowledge on where to go for learning, but in my experience, CPD do great free courses, and they can be anything from like basic sustainability knowledge to a real in-depth subject like finance, and like, so you can sort of choose. I think that focus on, if you know your sustainability stuff, pick an area that you're interested in and really learn about it, because you'll just find a passion for it. But another book I would recommend, and it's a weird one, but he's a climate change comedian called Matt Winning. And it's a book called Hot Mess. And he basically explains the climate crisis from a comedian's perspective. And so it's just a little bit lighter, you know, when you want to enhance your learning, but it's just a bit too heavy. Really, really good book that I would recommend.
Thanks, Zoe. I'm
really,
going
really
to
good book
go.
that I would recommend.
I'm going to go to Sunita now. What do you do, and how do you manage your morale, motivation, if you ever worry about how much difference your work makes?
This is a great question, because it can be really, really hard sometimes. And I think we've all touched on that in various ways during this call. And I think no matter what role it is you do, there will always be some element of, it can be described as guilt or just worrying that what you're doing isn't enough. And I think as young people as well, feeling that burden of responsibility that, you know, we have to solve the climate crisis, which is just not realistic that any individual alone is going to do that. But I think for me, what's been really, really key is community, and surrounding myself with people that are able to relate to that, but also people that are able to bring me and collectively create a sense of joy that allows me to escape that, because I think we can't spend all our time thinking about the climate crisis. I don't think that that's good for anyone's mental health, because it is such a huge, complex issue that, yeah, as I said, we can't solve on our own. So I think it's that mixture of being able to speak to people about it. Obviously, if you need help, seeking that help, and just always talking about these issues and being really open about that. But also at the same time, remembering that we can't think about this every second of the day. That's not anyone's responsibility, and to find ways and things that bring you joy, and ways to escape that, and ways to just have fun, because I think we all deserve that, and that's important for our resilience to allow us to be able to continue the work we do. So yeah, I think finding that balance.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Sunita. Someone mentioned it, but what courses, extra qualifications would you recommend to get up in to help get into the industry? Does anyone want to answer that, or shall I pick someone out?
I guess just for Greenpeace, maybe campaigning organizations, if you're going to be a digital campaigner, I don't think you need like a degree, to be honest. I think you'd be totally fine without one. I think relevant experience is kind of always helpful if you have done grassroots campaigns in your community, in your area, in your university, that type of thing. I mean, sorry, obviously not university, but in your like school or something like that, then that will, but that's obviously for a campaigning organization, maybe less so a sustainability role.
Thanks, Anthony. Okay, I think maybe we've got time for one more, and then I've just got one question I want to ask all of you, and then we'll be wrapping up. But let me just see what the next question is the most. I think this one is, how do you advise young people that say they want to work in your industry or do what you do? Oh, sorry, it's just jump. How would you approach it? I feel like we've covered that a little bit, but if anyone's got any extra advice on that.
Yeah, I guess, again, quite a similar answer to what I just said, but I think I was like working at the Disney store while I was doing grassroots and volunteer work before I was working for Greenpeace. And I feel like that stuff, unfortunately, like it can be difficult juggling your life and your social life doing all that stuff, but you will get invaluable knowledge from working with like passionate and experienced people that maybe you can't always get elsewhere like freely, to be honest, without being in the door. So I think like being aware of like grassroots campaigns in your area, or you know, that in your region or with your diaspora, like that is something like really valuable to just kind of get your skills and your experience up. Also, you know, you could potentially win a campaign as well, which is great.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony. Does anyone else want to chip in, or should I get onto the final question?
I would just chip in a little bit just to say I completely agree with that, and just say yes to everything that comes up. You just never know what experience will get you into that job, and like know your own mind. Like if you feel strongly about something like recycling, like Destiny, you just don't know what it is that's going to grab your passion. So like just lean into it. It's such an important subject. So don't be afraid of really leaning into it and following a particular path. Like jobs will become more specific because there's a need for it. So if something in particular really fascinates you, just learn and put yourself in every situation to be able to gain experience from that as well.
I also really agree with that. Even if there's like one person issue that you just really have a concern about, I think one of the very first things that I did, even before campaigning, was I like emailed my MP at the time, and he put me in touch with a recycling group, because like I was like really upset about like how like the bins weren't being like managed or taken care of very well, or something like that. And like now I'm in like a WhatsApp group with like all of them, and it's kind of the small things like that that like really do count, and like they've given me like pretty invaluable knowledge that I've taken on, probably subconsciously because it's been such a while now. But yeah, that's more of like if you have like a pressing issue, you just really need to contact someone, not necessarily about a job, but again just about a concern. That sort of helps in that sense, because You don't have to put like your whole heart and soul into it, because you have your own social commitments. Like juggling a degree and a campaign is probably one of the hardest things that you'll ever do, and I can't even give you advice on that because I'm just trying to get by every day. But yeah, there are people out there that do share the same concerns as you. It's just a case of how you're going to be able to like find those sort of people, but they're always around. So yeah, really saying yes and just reaching out to like whoever, making that first step is what always works for me.
Yeah, I so agree, that kind of like drawing on your community. I think that's also such a great positive way to end, really. I just want to say thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much to our panelists who have brought such insight into a topic that is pretty big. And I think that we've really touched on some really great advice and experiences that are all quite different, but actually there feels like there is quite a lot of crossover as well, which is really like nice to see. I just wondered, now that we're kind of wrapping up, if each of you could go around and just give, I'm slightly putting you on the spot a little bit, just one takeaway that's people in the room could kind of do in their day-to-day, maybe working workplace or their community, that that they could just take back with them, that you maybe have implemented or you kind of learned through your own experience.
I guess I can start. I guess the one thing, if I was to just give advice and just have something for you guys to take away, is I guess we've kind of just relayed this the whole time, but like start that conversation. It doesn't have to be like the tone that it comes across, it doesn't have to be like, oh my gosh, I'm really concerned about this issue, but like the moment you start like planting, the seeds of ideas in your head, it creates food for thought, and then you actually share the same sort of ideas as you. And even if people don't necessarily share the same ideas or like the same politics, there will always be something, almost always be something that you will share in common with somebody that you'll be able to work on. And I think, again, like exchanging ideas and thoughts and intentions is kind of where and why, at Tricks Hub is where it is at the moment. If we like, if us three like didn't sit down one day and we're like, what, we're kind of worried about the environment, kind of worried about how we're living, what are we going to do about it? Like, if we didn't have that first initial conversation, or like if we didn't apply to the Advocacy Academy and like write like basically like a personal statement about what like annoys us, then like, we wouldn't be where we are, and we wouldn't be having like the conversations that we're having today. So yeah, just start that conversation, because there will always be something that somebody else will pick up or not pick on, and you don't know where it will take you, which is kind of the best thing about it.
Yeah, I mean, to piggyback on that, I completely agree. Like, know your own mind, and you have no idea the influence that you have on the people around you, even if you're not having the conversations, but you should have the conversations. I completely agree. But yeah, there's so many little things that you don't want to worry other people about. You don't want to bore other people, sometimes you feel, and if you don't feel ready in that space to do that, just change your behaviors and people around you will notice. And you can influence others without having to, if you feel like you're not ready to have that conversation. But ultimately, I completely agree with Destiny, is that if you actually say out loud what you're thinking, you're going to be so surprised at the amount of people that really, really feel the same as you. And then who knows where that can go, just as it happened for Destiny.
I guess just to add on to everyone's extremely good insight, but yeah, having those conversations 100%, like organize within your local area. By having those conversations, that's kind of the first step, right? Which is, I guess, like what Destiny has done. And then like whether if you're in a corporate landscape or you're in a company, that you can kind of organize / unionize or whatever the mechanism is to kind of make that sustainability role that Zoe has. And those all start from conversations and finding out that there are like-minded people who believe in the same thing that you do, and you have strength in numbers, which is the people power element of like campaigning.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what everyone has said. And I think to throw in my 2 cents, I think that it's so important to find what you're passionate about within this space, and really find what speaks to you. So, you know, whether that's social media or art or storytelling or TV, there is no one climate career. There's no one way to be in this industry or to be able to influence climate and environmental transformation. So yeah, find the role, find the passion that speaks to you, and use that as your kind of guiding light if this is something that you're passionate about and interested in working in. Yeah, sorry that my sensor light has gone off, but that's sustainability for you. Sensor lights. But yeah.
Well, yeah, such a brilliant note to end on. And I've definitely will be taking away that idea of voicing what you believe in to the people around you. So thank you for joining, and please do just spend a minute filling out this feedback form if you can. It's also my colleague Yasmin has put it in the chat, but yeah, I hope you all have a wonderful evening, and hopefully see you again at another masterclass. But thank you so much to our panelists.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye everyone, you're free to go have dinner.